pulse of him.
The first time I watched Calderbrook speak in person, he was talking about values. Not his own, he never did, but the kind people like to believe they share. Family, stability, tradition. He stood behind a polished podium beneath warm lights, suit immaculate, posture effortless. No tie. Just confidence, clean and expensive. The room hung on every word like he was confessing something brave instead of repeating something safe. I stood near the back, half hidden between a column and the exit sign, my badge turned around so no one could read my name. I wasn't supposed to be there. Not officially. I wasn't a donor or a board member or anyone the camera might linger on. I was just adjacent. Conveniently invisible. When the applause came, it was loud. Earnest. Proud. I clapped too. Softly. Out of habit more than belief. Later that night, I was barefoot in his hotel room, city lights stretching below us like something unreal, watching Calder loosen the cuffs of his shirt with a quiet sigh. "Well," he said, rolling his shoulders like he just shrugged off a weight. "They loved it. They always do," I replied. He smiled, not the public one. The private version, smaller, warmer. He crossed the room and stopped close enough that I felt the heat from his body before he touched me. "You disappeared right after," he said. "I thought you'd left." "I wanted to," I admitted. His hand found my waist anyway, familiar and certain. He kissed me like he always did, unhurried, controlled, like this was the only place he didn't have to perform. For a moment, everything narrowed to breath and touch and the quiet hum of the building settling around us. Afterward, we lay tangled in white sheets, his arm heavy across my chest, fingers tracing lazy lines on my skin. This was the version of him no one ever saw. Hair undone. Voice lower. Guard relaxed. "I've got breakfast with donors tomorrow," he said, staring up at the ceiling. "Press might drop by." "Of course," I said. He shifted slightly. "You don't have to stay the night if you don't want to." I let out a quiet laugh. "When have I ever stayed?" That landed somewhere between us. Not sharp, just real. He turned his head to look at me. "You knew what this was." "I know," I said. "That doesn't mean it doesn't change." I pushed myself up, sheet pulling at my waist, suddenly too aware of how small the room felt. "Do you ever hear yourself when you're on stage?" His jaw tightened, not angry, just careful. "What's that supposed to mean, Elias?" I met his eyes. "You talk about honesty. About living in alignment. And then you step off stage and come back here with me like those are two separate lives." He sat up, reached for my hand, lacing our fingers together. His thumb brushed my knuckle, grounding and intimate. "You know why I can't be public," he said quietly. I did. That was the problem. We stayed like that for a long time, city noise leaking through the glass, his touch steady and absent-minded. Outside, the world applauded the man he showed them. Inside, I lay beside him, feeling invisible in the only place he ever let me exist, still not ready to walk away, but finally aware of how much it was costing me. I left before sunrise. Not because Calder asked me to. He never did that. He just slept, arm still warm where it had been across my ribs, breath slow and even, like the world wasn't already waiting for him to become someone else again. I stood there for a second, watching him, trying to memorize the unguarded version, the one who existed only when no one was looking. I dressed quietly. Shirt. Jeans. Shoes in my hand until I reached the door. The hotel hallway smelled like stale coffee and carpet cleaner, that weird in-between scent of mornings meant for other people. By the time I stepped outside, the city was already waking up. Delivery trucks. Joggers. Men in suits talking into Bluetooth headsets like they were born doing it. Calder would be one of them in an hour. Smile back on. Lines ready. I wondered, not for the first time, how easily I disappeared once I wasn't in the room. 3 days later, I saw his face everywhere. A banner outside a downtown hotel. A clipped interview autoplaying on my phone while I waited for a rideshare. An email forwarded by a coworker with the subject line, "Have you seen this guy?" Calder stood in front of a flag this time, talking about protecting the future for our children. The comments were a mess, half praise, half arguments, but all of them assumed the same thing: that he was exactly who he presented himself to be. I didn't comment. I never did. Instead, I watched the video again, this time without sound. His hands moved the same way they did when he talked to me. Controlled. Measured. Like every gesture had been rehearsed. My phone buzzed. "You free tonight, Calder?" I stared at the screen longer than necessary. The question wasn't could I go. It was whether I should. For a bit I typed back. The dots appeared almost instantly. Good. Dinner. My place. His place was quieter than the hotel. Cleaner. More deliberate. Everything had a purpose, from the art on the walls to the wine already breathing on the counter when I arrived. He greeted me with a kiss to the cheek, careful, almost formal before the door even closed. It felt different. Not colder. Just aware. "You okay?" he asked, once we were inside. I shrugged out of my jacket. "You're trending," I said lightly. "Congrats." He exhaled, a tired sound. "I hate that word." "You don't hate the attention." He didn't deny it. Instead, he moved closer, resting his forehead briefly against mine. "I hate that it makes things harder." That was the closest he ever came to acknowledging the cost. We ate at the counter, knees brushing, conversations circling safely around work and logistics, and things that didn't bruise. Afterward, we sat on the couch, his arm along the backrest, my head leaning just close enough to feel included but not claimed. At some point, he squeezed my shoulder. Not possessive. Reassuring. "This won't always be like this," he said quietly. I looked at him then. Really looked. At the man who could promise futures to rooms full of strangers and still sound convincing. "Just tell me the truth," I said. "Is that something you believe or something you need me to?" He was silent for a long moment. Then his thumb traced a small, absent circle against my arm. "I believe in us," he said. It wasn't an answer. But it was what he had. Later, walking home alone, the city lights softer than I remembered, I realized something had shifted. Not broken. Just clarified. I wasn't invisible. I was hidden. And knowing the difference didn't make the choice easier, but it finally made it mine. The fundraiser was the kind of event where everything looked expensive and nothing felt personal. Crystal glasses. Low music. Conversations that never quite landed anywhere real. Calder moved through the room like he belonged to the architecture itself, handshakes, smiles, brief laughs that stopped short of intimacy. I stayed near the perimeter, nursing a drink I didn't want, watching him become the version everyone paid to see. He didn't look at me much. That was intentional. When he did, it was quick, professional, like I was just another familiar face in the crowd. It stung more than I expected, even though I'd agreed to it. A woman in a red dress took my spot beside the column without asking. She laughed too loudly at something Calder said, fingers resting on his sleeve like they'd practiced it. He didn't pull away. I finished my drink and set the glass down untouched by the sink. Later, I found him in the quiet hallway outside the private office, loosening his tie with a frustrated tug. The door was half closed. No one else around. "You're leaving already?" he asked when he saw me. "Was I supposed to stay?" I said, keeping my voice even. He stepped closer, lowering it. "You knew tonight would be like this." "I know," I said. "I just didn't expect to feel like a ghost." His expression tightened. Not angry, cornered. He reached out, then stopped himself, hand dropping back to his side. "This is temporary," he said again, like repetition might turn it into truth. I looked at him, really looked. The man who filled rooms. The man who vanished the moment the doors closed. "Temporary things still leave marks," I said. We didn't touch. That felt important. I left before the speeches started, slipping out into the cool night air where the city felt less staged. I walked instead of calling a car, letting the distance stretch, letting the noise fade. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone buzzed with a message from him. I didn't open it right away. I set the phone down, washed my hands, changed my shirt, small rituals to remind myself I existed outside of borrowed spaces. When I finally read it, it was exactly what I expected. An apology without specifics. An assurance without a timeline. I didn't reply that night. I sat by the window instead, watching headlights blur past below, and let the quiet settle. Not heavy. Not sharp. Just honest. For the first time since I met Calder Brooks, I wasn't thinking about what he needed or what he feared or what I was willing to sacrifice to stay close. I was thinking about myself. And that thought, steady, unfamiliar, mine, felt like the beginning of something, even if I didn't yet know what it would cost to follow it. A week passed without seeing him. That hadn't happened in months. Usually there was a text by day 2, a reason disguised as an invitation. Dinner. A walk. Just for a bit. This time, there was nothing. No apology follow-up. No check-in. Just silence stretched thin enough to feel intentional. I told myself it was relief. I focused on work. Took longer routes home. Said yes to plans I'd usually cancel. I laughed more than I meant to, like volume could cover the quiet spaces where Calder used to live in my head. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed while I was in line for coffee. "Can we talk, Calder?" No explanation. No softening. "Where?" I typed back. "My place. Tonight. If that's okay." It wasn't about okay. It was about whether I was ready to hear whatever version of the truth he'd decided to offer. "I'll come by," I replied. He opened the door, already dressed down, dark sweater, sleeves pushed up, no armor. The apartment felt dimmer than usual, like he'd drawn the evening in around himself. "Hey," he said. "Hey." We stood there a beat too long, the space between us suddenly unfamiliar. Then he stepped aside, letting me in. "I've been thinking," he said once the door closed. "About what you said. About being hidden." I didn't answer. I set my keys down carefully, like sudden movement might break whatever fragile honesty had decided to show up. "I can't change everything," he continued. "Not overnight. You know that." "I know," I said. "I'm not asking for overnight." He nodded, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "But I also can't keep pretending this doesn't affect you. That you don't exist outside these walls." That landed heavier than anything he'd said before. He took a breath, steadying. "There's a small dinner next month. Private. No press. A few donors I trust. I want you there. With me." "With you how?" I asked. His eyes met mine. No dodging. "As myself." It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a revolution. It was a crack. And somehow, that scared me more than the silence had. We didn't touch right away. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the city humming faintly through the windows, both of us weighing the shape of what he'd offered. Part of me wanted to say yes just to feel chosen. Another part, the one that had started waking up, wanted to be sure this wasn't just another controlled gesture. "I need you to understand something," I said finally. "I can't keep shrinking to fit the space you're comfortable giving me." He nodded slowly. "I don't want you to." That was new. Later, when he walked me to the door, his hand brushed mine, hesitant, asking instead of taking. I let our fingers lace together briefly, just long enough to feel the possibility without letting it harden into a promise. As I stepped into the hallway, I realized the fear felt different now. Less like falling. More like standing at the edge of a door that might actually open. I didn't know yet whether I'd walk through it. But for the first time, I believed he might unlock it himself. The dinner was smaller than I expected. No banners. No microphones. Just a long table in a private room above a restaurant that smelled like citrus and wine and money. 10 people, maybe 12. The kind who spoke softly because they were used to being listened to. Calder arrived with me. Not ahead of me. Not 5 steps in front. Beside me. That alone felt louder than any announcement. Heads turned. Not dramatically, just enough. Curiosity flickered, quickly masked by polite smiles. Calder introduced me simply. This is Elias. No title. No explanation. Just my name, said like it belonged there. I shook hands. Answered questions about work. Smiled when appropriate. My pulse didn't slow, but it steadied. Calder's hand brushed the small of my back once as we took our seats, brief, grounding, real. Across the table, someone asked him about his foundation. He answered smoothly, practiced as ever. But when he spoke about honesty, about consistency between private and public life, his eyes met mine for half a second longer than necessary. I felt seen. Not exposed. Chosen. Later, after dessert plates were cleared and the conversation thinned into smaller threads, Calder leaned toward me. You okay? He murmured. I nodded. You? He smiled, just slightly. Asked me after? We left together, thanked the host, rode the elevator down in silence that wasn't empty. Outside, the night was cool, forgiving. Traffic hummed. Somewhere below us, the city kept being itself. We walked a block before either of us spoke. That wasn't nothing, I said. No, he agreed. It wasn't. He stopped then, turning to face me fully under a streetlight that flattened shadows and told the truth. I know this doesn't fix everything. I know it's small. It's not small to me, I said. But it can't be the only step. He nodded. Not defensively. Thoughtfully. I don't want it to be. For a moment neither of us moved. Then he reached for my hand, open, deliberate. I let him take it. People passed us. No one stared. The world didn't end. That night, back at his place, we didn't rush. We talked instead. About timelines. About fear. About what he was willing to lose and what I wasn't willing to keep sacrificing. It wasn't romantic. It was honest. And somehow, that felt more intimate than anything else we'd shared. Later, lying beside him, his breathing slow and familiar, I stared at the ceiling and let the quiet settle. I didn't know how this would unfold. I didn't know how public his courage would become, or how patient mine could stay. But I knew this. I was no longer pretending the margins were enough. As sleep finally crept in, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not certainty. Not victory. Just space. And for the first time, that space felt like it might actually be mine to fill. The morning after the dinner felt deceptively normal. Sunlight through the blinds. Coffee brewing. Calder reading emails on his phone with the same calm focus he used before stepping onto any stage. If I didn't know better, I could have believed nothing had changed at all. But something had. When he finished his coffee, he didn't immediately stand up. He stayed at the table, phone face down, looking at me instead. I have a meeting today, he said. With my communications director. I waited. I'm not coming out, he added clearly, before I could fill the silence with hope. Not like that. Not yet. The old disappointment stirred, familiar and sharp, but it didn't take over. But I am telling her there's someone in my life, he continued, that I'm not interested in playing the values bachelor anymore. That's not nothing, I said carefully. He smiled, just a little. You're right. It isn't. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand once, steady and grounding, before standing to grab his jacket. The gesture lingered longer than the touch itself. The backlash didn't come immediately. It arrived in pieces. A columnist wondering aloud why Calder's tone had softened. A donor quietly withdrawing support. An aide asking too many questions with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Calder told me about it in fragments, never dramatizing, never asking me to reassure him. I listened. That felt new too, being trusted with the cost, not just the comfort. One night, a few weeks later, we stood in his kitchen while pasta boiled over because neither of us was paying attention. They asked if I was seeing someone, he said, turning the heat down. I didn't deny it. I leaned against the counter. And I said I value my privacy. he replied. That my work speaks for itself. I studied his face, looking for regret. I didn't find it. Just resolve, quiet, imperfect, but real. Outside, sirens passed. Inside, the air felt charged, like the pause before weather breaks. You know this might never end neatly, I said. I know, he answered. I'm not asking you to promise anything. That mattered more than 1,000 rehearsed speeches. The first time we walked into a public space holding hands, no one noticed. It was a bookstore. Small. Crowded. Shelves too close together. Calder's grip was loose, offering an out. I tightened mine instead. No gasps. No whispers. Just the ordinary shuffle of people reaching for novels and coffee. He exhaled, a sound that was almost a laugh. That was anticlimactic. Most important things are, I said. Later, back at my place, we sat on the floor with our backs against the couch, sharing takeout from the same container. He rested his head against my shoulder, casual, unguarded. I don't know where this goes, he said quietly. I didn't look at him when I answered. Neither do I. And for once, that uncertainty didn't feel like a threat. It felt like room. Like forward motion that didn't require disappearing. As the night settled around us, I realized something simple and heavy at the same time. Whatever the world decided Calder Brooks was, whatever he risked or lost or held on to, I was no longer waiting in the dark for permission to exist. I was already here. And this unfinished, imperfect, real was enough to keep me standing. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning. Not a hit piece. Worse. A think piece. Calder Brooks and the Quiet Evolution of Conservative Image Management. No accusations. No proof. Just speculation wrapped in careful language. A mention of a private personal life. An unnamed source noting he'd been seen recently in unfamiliar company. The comments section did what comments always do, argued with itself, invented narratives, filled silence with noise. Calder didn't call me right away. He texted instead. We need to talk tonight. I stared at the screen, feeling that old reflex brace, minimize, prepare to be reasonable. Then I stopped. Let the phone rest in my palm until my breathing slowed. Okay, I replied. I'll come over. He looked tired when he opened the door. Not panicked. Not undone. Just worn in a way I hadn't seen before. They're circling, he said once we were inside. Testing reactions. Seeing what sticks. I nodded. And you? He considered the question longer than usual. I'm angry. Which is new. That surprised me. He noticed. I built something very carefully, he went on. And I let myself believe it was airtight. Turns out, it was just quiet. We sat across from each other, knees almost touching. No reaching. No softening yet. They asked me today, he said. Directly. Whether there was someone. Whether I planned to address it. And? I asked. And I said no, he replied. Then quickly added. Not because I'm ashamed. Because I won't let them dictate the timing of my life. The words landed differently than they used to. Not like an excuse. Like a line he was finally drawing for himself. I need to know something, he said, voice lower now. If this gets louder, if my name becomes a battleground, you're allowed to walk away. I won't follow you with promises I can't keep. I held his gaze. I'm not here because it's quiet, Calder. That was the truth. Simple. Heavy. Later, we stood by the window, city spread out below us, lights blinking on as evening took hold. He stood close, not hiding, not claiming. Just present. I don't know what the last step looks like, he said. I just know I'm tired of living like the middle is enough. I leaned my head against his shoulder. He didn't tense. Didn't perform. Whatever happens next, I said, I need it to be forward. Even if it's messy. He nodded once. No speeches. No vows. We stayed there for a long time, watching the city exist without us, without permission. For the first time, The uncertainty didn't feel like something circling us. It felt like something opening. And as the night settled quiet, unresolved, honest, I understood this wasn't the moment of arrival. It was the moment before deciding not to go back. The decision didn't come with fireworks. No press conference. No dramatic resignation. Just a quiet shift that started on a Thursday afternoon, when Calder called me, not texted, and asked if I could come by. "I need you here," he said. Not urgently. Honestly. When I arrived, his apartment looked the same as always. Clean lines. Neutral colors. Control built into the walls. But Calder himself felt different. Sleeves rolled up. Tie abandoned on the counter like something he'd already outgrown. "They want a statement," he said without preamble. "Something vague. Something reassuring." "And?" I asked. "And I told them I'd write it myself." I didn't speak. I waited. That felt important. He met my eyes. "Not about you. Not naming anything. Just not lying." That was the line, I realized. Not visibility. Not bravery as performance. Just refusal. The statement went live that evening. Short. Plain. Almost boring. A reaffirmation of privacy. A reminder that personal life wasn't policy. A sentence near the end that caught in my chest anyway. Integrity means consistency, even when silence is easier. People read into it what they wanted. Some praised it. Some scoffed. A few donors walked. Others stayed. The world adjusted the way it always does, imperfectly, noisily, without waiting for permission. Calder watched the reactions roll in from the couch, phone face down after 10 minutes. "I expected it to feel bigger," he said. "It is bigger," I replied. "It's just not louder." Later, we walked outside together. No destination. Just movement. The night air was cool, grounding. At one point, his hand brushed mine. This time, he didn't hesitate. We walked like that, open, unremarkable, real. No one stared. One person smiled at us without knowing why. Weeks passed. Life settled into something less sharp. Calder was still Calder, meetings, speeches, compromises, but there was less division in him now. Fewer locked doors. Fewer rooms I wasn't allowed to enter. One morning, months later, we stood in his kitchen making coffee, sunlight cutting clean lines across the floor. He leaned against the counter, watching me like he had nowhere else to be. "I don't know what this looks like in 5 years," he said. I handed him a mug. "I don't need 5 years." He smiled at that. Not relieved. Grounded. Standing there, I understood something I hadn't before. Love wasn't the grand reveal, or the perfect alignment of courage and timing. It was the daily decision not to disappear. Not from yourself. Not from each other. Calder Brooks would always be a public man. That wasn't changing. But I was no longer hidden. And as the day began quiet, unfinished, hours, I felt certain of one thing: whatever came next, I wouldn't be watching it from the shadows. I was already where I belong.